Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Conversations on Consciousness. Let us begin with a small prayer. Sarvatma Sarvadrugyoso Sarvadhyasa Nirasakrit Satatam Sannidhattam Me Hridaye Paramashivah Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Lokashankaram. Today, we have a very special guest, Swami Chidanandaji, joining us all the way from Solan, Himachal Pradesh. Swamiji, thank you for accepting our invitation and joining us today.
I'm very happy to join you, Manu, and I have a great regard for the work Advaita Academy has been doing.
Thank you, Swamiji. For the benefit of our viewers, I would like to introduce Swamiji. Swami Chidanandaji has been a Vedanta teacher and speaker on human values for more than 3 decades. After he served for 5 years as the resident Vedanta teacher in San Jose, California in the mid-1990s, his work has been mostly in India and the USA. Since 2006, he heads 4x Forum, a non-profit that disseminates philosophical and spiritual knowledge with special coverage of Indian ethos. Numerous talks by him are on YouTube at the 4Y channel. The author of 7 books, he is specially known for his presentations on Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. Hailing from Udupi district in Karnataka, he has been living in Solan, Himachal Pradesh since 2013. He had begun with a career in electronics engineering with a BE from Mysore University and an MTech from IIT Madras. Then he served Chinmaya Mission, the organization of Swami Chinmayanandaji, for 18 years and the foundation of Jiddu Krishnamurti for 10 years. Swamiji, I welcome you once again. Thank you. I would directly move on to the questions. Tell us a bit about your upbringing and your initial influences on life.
Yes, I grew up in the small town Kundapur in Udupi district, as you have today. And our family had some amount of religion. There used to be bhajans every evening. We children used to join our mother, especially till we came to high school and so on. We were very obedient. We would join them. And before dinner, we used to have some bhajans, then some little arati, and then night food. And of course, we used to have some homa, havan, etc. occasionally at our home. We ourselves were not Vaidika Brahmanas, but we were inviting Vaidikas to hold programs. But of course, my father, my brothers, and I myself would do Sandhya Vandana and such. General adherence to Sanatana Dharma. Traditionally, our family owed allegiance to Guru Narasimha temple in Salagrama Kota. Otherwise, Smarta Sampradaya, though we did not directly connect to Sringeri, technically we were very much adoring and admiring Sringeri Jagat Gurus. In my childhood, once or twice, my parents took me. We had darshan of the Jagat Guru. But for the Kota Brahmin community, the Guru Narasimha is everything. That's what my priests used to say. We have Guru Narasimha himself is the Guru for us, not anybody else. That was their view. However, finally, when I went to college in Davangere, I must confess, I became a little off track. I was not into any god or any religion. But later, without much delay, during my MTech in IIT Madras, it was a major milestone. I had a classmate, Ramakrishnan, who is presently a professor in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He actually took me to Chinmaya. And I, on one hand, read books of Swami Chinmayanandaji, but before I could see him face to face, I met Swami Paramarthananda, who was at that time Brahmachari Paramartha Chaitanya. And even to this day, I adore him a lot. His classes I attended every Sunday. And he became a kind of role model for me. Even today, though my life has gone in a different direction, I am not so orthodox or so traditional in my approach. In my heart of hearts, I sometimes wish I was like Paramarthanandji, sticking to the Shastra and not looking left or right. But as you know, and I will elaborate later, I went off into J. Krishnamurti and so many general, thinkers of the world and so on, with its own plus and minus points.
Oh, thank you so much. And you already mentioned about your gurus, but I would want to know how you got to know them and much more. So,
Yes,
who were your formal gurus, and how did your Vedanta study go ahead with them?
correct. So let me quickly show a few pictures of my gurus. As I already mentioned, yes, here it is. In 1980, I joined IIT Madras, and within 2 months, my friend Ramakrishnan introduced me to Paramarthananda, whose picture is seen here at the bottom left. And he was Brahmachari Paramartha Chaitanya at that time. And very soon, in a couple of months, Swami Chinmayanandji, who is at the center here, came to Chennai, and I tell you, it was a feast to attend his lectures. It was educative, entertaining, inspiring, and I was so excited. My hair stood on their ends. And then, in fact, I never looked back. I was dreaming of joining his ashram right away, but it took some years. It was 1984 March that I joined. So not very far, in 3 or 4 years, I ended up as a brahmachari in Swami Chinmayananda's ashram. So to quickly give a round of the influences on my life, uh, initially it was only Chinmayananda who made sense to me. I actually tried to read the Who Am I, Nan Yaru inquiry of Ramana Maharshi. Once I went to Ramana Kendra, Chennai, picked up that book, but nothing went inside me. Everything was vague. I attended a talk by J. Krishnamurti when I was in Chennai, 1981, I think. Everything went above my head. I was not able to relate to it. But Chinmaya had a communication, a certain language, and after all, it is our Pura Sanskaras. I was so excited. And later on, of course, I moved away to New Delhi, worked there in a company for 2 years. I continued to study Vedanta there also with the person who is today known as Swami Prabhuddhananda in New Delhi. And that was also very uplifting. And then to cover, during my 2 years in Powai, Bombay, at Swami Chinmayanandaji's ashram, I chanced upon the book Arthur Osborne's writing or compilation, The Teachings of Ramana Maharshi in His Own Words. That was a book I could not put down. It seemed to answer all my questions. It seemed to grasp the essence of Advaita Vedanta. So while I went on with the study of Adi Shankara's works taught in the Chinmaya Ashram, and also enjoyed the Sanskrit, enjoyed Vedic chanting, I enjoyed all the subjects, my heart was moving very fast towards Ramana Maharshi. Therefore, eventually, there was hardly any talk by me which without any reference to Ramana Maharshi. And later on, it was somewhere in 92 that after several repeated attempts at understanding what J. Krishnamurti is talking about and failing at it, it flashed to me that very negation of all concepts, of all structures, of all rigidities. He is in his own language pointing to the pure awareness, though he doesn't use that word. He is talking of that such in his own way. It occurred to me. And in 93, when Chinmaya Mission posted me, after I had taught a brahmachari course in Mumbai, they posted me in California. I had a chance to visit Krishnamurti Center in Southern California. I watched some of his videos, heard some of his audios, and Krishnamurti is connecting to real life, daily life, and actual challenges of human life appealed to me a lot. Now, to do justice to the whole slide which I'm sharing with you, there is another revered Swamiji in this picture. His Kannada translations of Upanishad, Shankara Bhashya, etc., were very handy to us even as early as 1984-85, so precise, and his footnotes and his analysis of Sanskrit expressions was simply amazing. For that part, I always admired him. But some of his teachings, where he dismisses the so-called Mula Vidya, simply beyond. So, Swami Satchidanandendra Saraswati's books have been part of our study, but not some of his positions with regard to Advaita Vedanta. But today, I am putting his picture also in the galaxy of teachers who deeply touched me, because in the last 4 years, I finally understood what he means by saying there is nothing called causal avidya and so on. It's a complicated topic. Most people don't know what the problem is, let alone the answer. But thanks to a former teacher of mine in engineering college, Dr. K.S. Ramanatha, who lives in Bangalore, who in fact towards his retirement was a principal of RV College of Engineering, not RV, MS Ramaya Institute of Technology in Bangalore. He is an ardent follower of Swami Satchidanandendra Saraswati. I reconnected with him after a gap of 37 years. And with him, when I discussed Satchidanandendra Saraswati, everything fell in place. And today, as far as study of Shankara Vedanta is concerned, it is Swami Satchidanandendra Saraswati's interpretations that appeal to me, convince me, and hold me in awe. I am very fascinated by Swami Satchidanandendra Saraswati's works on the Upanishads. Presently, I am studying his very, very scholarly work called Mandukya Rahasya Vivratihi, which is a very scholarly work in pure Sanskrit that he has written explaining the Mandukya Upanishad, Shankara's commentary, and Gaudapada's Karikas. And it is such a feast to an intellect drawn to Advaita Vedanta. That's where I share with you the major influences on my life in the context of spirituality.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you had a brilliant journey from two different streams, one from J. Krishnamurti's works, influences, and also from the traditional Advaita Vedanta teachers. So, moving on, as I read out from your bio, you had a brilliant track record in education also. But why did you choose to give it up and dedicate your full time to Vedanta?
True enough. Actually, I was not intending to go full time into Vedanta. Without my mother asking me, I myself promised her in 1984, Amma, don't worry, after studying 2.5 years of Vedanta at Chinmaya Ashram, I will come back and take a job again. And I did come back. Between 86 and 89, I taught electronic engineering at the well-known Bangalore Institute of Technology in Bengaluru. But then I saw that my happiness mainly lay in study and teaching Vedanta. I liked teaching electronics too. Basically, I liked communicating, understand something, share it with others, and when the audience also feel happy about what is shared, the speaker is very happy. So whether it was circuit theory, computer hardware, or Mundaka Upanishad, or Bhajagovindam, whatever it is, to understand, enjoy the order in the thoughts, and share was my joy. But somewhere in 88 and 89, when I again and again met Swami Chinmayanandji, who was coming to Bangalore, it occurred to me as they say sometimes, why do you want to travel in two boats? And also being the youngest of 7 sons and 3 daughters of my parents, I hardly had any responsibility to look after my parents and so on. And on some such criteria, I decided. And above all, logically, I was convinced that a man should work in a field where both criteria have to be satisfied. What are they? It should bring happiness to him. It should involve service to the society. And I was convinced that to be a spiritual student and teacher, etc., also rendered as much service, if not more, to the society as an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or a businessman would do. All may not understand. Even recently, somebody over WhatsApp sent a question to me. He reconnected with me after 45 years. He said, hey, why did you leave engineering? You could have served the society. He imagines that there is no service from spiritual centers. I just kept quiet. He thinks that in the materialistic world only it is possible to serve people. Swami Paramarthananda and such people are a source of so much peace, so much happiness, so much satisfaction to lots of people, which they don't get from their big house or TV or car or the bank balance. Therefore, I said goodbye to electronics and other pursuits. And about that, I have no regrets at all. Though I say that because I thought pretty soon I would be enlightened. That is no joke. It's a long drawn journey. We have to exhaust so many of our sanskaras, vasanas. And so, but the journey is enjoyable. I am finding Vedanta as fascinating as before, if not more.
That is just a wonderful journey, Swamiji. Thank you so much for sharing that. And moving on, you have served both Chinmaya Mission and Foundation of Jiddu Krishnamurti. So what are the key teachings of these two masters that have influenced you very much?
Yes. As I confessed before, I'm trying to stop sharing. What happened? Oh, here. J. Krishnamurti made no sense to me. He looked very negative, cynical at the beginning. But when finally I got an idea of what he is saying, it became clear to me that he is in fact pretty close to the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. Therefore, I regard Ramana Maharshi as a bridge between traditional Vedanta and someone like J. Krishnamurti. Let me explain how. Maharshi Ramana is in full agreement with Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. But the samagri, the material that Ramana Maharshi left behind as a legacy, as everybody knows, has a great emphasis on self-inquiry, understanding the movement of ego, this little I. And if we look at Maharshi as focusing on self-inquiry, it became more and more clear to me that J. Krishnamurti was emphasizing on self-watching. He did not emphasize asking oneself, who am I? He rather said, keep an eye on the self with a small s, not the pure self of Vedanta. The self meaning the separate self, separate I. And as I studied more and more, heard his audios, watched some of his videos, it became clear to me that though he seems to dismiss Ishvara, Guru, and Shastra, the teachings that he left behind are precisely of the nature of dismissing the separate self, and though he is silent about the all-pervasive self, Advaita Vedanta talks about the all-pervasive Atma, Asamsari Atma, which has no birth, no death, no change, and so on. Krishnamurti, like the Buddha, is silent on the pure self, but he dismisses the separate self very, very ably. And his special dimension is he talks the contemporary language. For example, he would talk about ambition, he would talk about social disparities, he would talk about how the human mind typically is highly conditioned, heavily conditioned by various identities. I am a Hindu, she is a Muslim, or I am a Brahmin and she is a non-Brahmin. I am a South Indian and that person is a Punjabi. 100 ways, 1,000 ways, anywhere in the world, an American, an African, an Australian, everyone is riding on a wave of identity, identification. And Krishnamurti shows with great skill how these identities may serve a little bit of practical purpose, nobody denies that, but they have generated so much of disharmony, so much of judgmentalism. And that language of throwing light upon how even thinking of ourselves as Indians is to be examined carefully. All about that Indianness may not be good. There may be some good component, but then there may be a component where it may room for hatred of non-Indians or whatever. So Krishnamurti's language is very contemporary. No reference to Gita or Upanishad, Bible or Quran, but he did talk about dismissal. And being a student and teacher of Vedanta, there is hardly any lecture that I give on this Prasthanatraya, where even when I don't want to do, I end up quoting J. Krishnamurti and saying, this is how Krishnamurti had questioned or asked us to question a certain form of this I. To complete my reference, Adi Shankara in the Adhyasa Bhashya, most famous portion of Brahma Sutra Bhashya, talks about the false identity. There is a false identification with the body and mind, and then there is the separate self. And he says to remove this separate self, to remove this adhyasa, superimposition, is the purpose of all the Upanishads. And J. Krishnamurti relentlessly actually strove to take out from the human mind any sense of separate identity. All walls, all judgmentalism of hundreds of kinds. Somebody has done PhD, and if that person looks down at a cousin of his who went only up to 10th standard, Krishnamurti would say, hold on, this idea, I am a PhD and she is only a 10th standard pass, may have a little sense, relevance somewhere. Otherwise, it means nothing. There is no superiority or inferiority. Saying that, let me conclude. Advaita finally is to dismiss all high and low, all superiority and inferiority. This superiority and inferiority may have some kind of functional relevance. My favorite example is if, as you and I are talking, somebody brings a letter written in Bengali. Now, in order to read that Bengali letter, you need a person who knows Bengali. But next moment, a girl comes and wants to present a little Bharatanatyam. To enjoy that Bharatanatyam, knowledge of Bengali, Kannada or English is not needed. To enjoy the Bharatanatyam of that 10-year-old girl, no PhD is needed and 10th standard is not a disqualification. So you see, for a little of relevance, a whole lot of irrelevance is the matter with all judgments. I think of myself as superior, maybe in some narrow context, But 99.9% of scenarios, I have no business to think of myself as superior. Therefore, Advaita makes us walk around with that understanding deep inside. I am Satchit, and this lady also is Satchit. That prisoner also is Satchit. So, everyone is the same Brahma, is actually the dismissal of unduly carried identities. Krishnamurti also talks about it. So he talks about self-observation. Maharshi Ramana talked about self-inquiry. Traditional Vedanta talks of Tattvamasi, that is taking Tvam and Tat both together. Maharshis is a variation. Maharshis is like a specialization in Advaita Vedanta, where the focus is on Tvam-pada. Tvam-pada represents me. Who am I? He is Tvam-pada Anveshana. Shankara's comprehensive Vedanta is the Anveshana of both Tvam, that is Jiva, and Tat, that is Ishvara, and their oneness. Maharshi is known to have said, you find out who you are, rest of it will fall in place. He does not talk, in any critical way about Tatpada. On the contrary, he does endorse devotion to God. But the method that he championed, Nanu Yaru, who am I inquiry, takes up the Jiva Bhava and questions it without concerning much with God, that is Tat. And lastly, Maharshi said, if you find out who you are, God will take care of himself. Don't worry about it. That is with a touch of humor, not to put God down in any manner.
Swamiji, that is wonderfully put together. Thank you so much. And as you mentioned in your previous answer, that is, people do not understand the contribution of Vedanta that it makes to the society as a whole. So my question is, how can Vedanta be viewed in today's modern context? And how can the younger generation connect with it and make their life better?
Right. So, modern context, what characterizes it is a lot of new things are coming up. Society is changing. Boundaries of countries are also changing. And people are migrating. There is the Indian diaspora. Indians, people are everywhere in the world. And then people come face to face with other faiths, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and so on. Now, among, for example, people who have settled in United States from India, every now and then we hear a son of some people who have settled there, or a daughter of some people who have settled there, marries a Jewish person, marries a Christian boy or girl. So modern context is marked by so much diversity. Now I come to the point. Vedanta can help everyone in the modern context to accept this diversity without over judgmentalism. Vedanta can truly help the modern generation to appreciate different belief structures, different theories, but with the understanding of Vedanta, go about it without any conflict. It's like saying, you are right, but I am not wrong. Your garden has this beauty. Come and see my garden, if you spend some time there, has its own beauty. To put in another way, Vedanta can help every one of us in the modern context also to place everything in its proper place. A place for everything and everything in its place is a slogan that is in the context of harmony and peace. Now, for younger generation, someone said youth is a time to err and old age a time to repent. That's a very pessimistic and negative statement. I don't say that, but I always quote it. and carefully wording it as somebody said, youth is a time to err. But there is a grain of truth in it because during younger days, people don't know. The young boy, the young girl is not sure what to do with life. Today, you ask a 30-year-old girl or a 30-year-old boy, they are very unsure whether they should marry at all. They find so many divorces. They find husbands and wives fighting among their older cousins and so on. Therefore, though like any human being, they are attracted to the opposite gender, they are sometimes happy to, a boy is happy to meet some pretty girl, and a girl is happy to get to know some boy. Right along with it, they are afraid. So Vedanta can help younger generation to regain certain confidence in themselves. Vedanta can help the youth to realize that come what may, even if things go wrong, there is in me a deeper dimension. There is in me something larger. I am not just 5 or 6 descriptions bundled up and then full stop. No, I am much more than how I may describe as going by profession, going by some hobbies, talents, by looks, etc. Make a list of 10 self descriptions. Vedanta says all these 10 descriptions of yourself, like I am the son of so and so, I am a graduate from such and such college, I have traveled already to 7 countries and hope to see another 10 countries. So like that, describe yourself 1, 2, 3. I like Congress, I don't like BJP, or the other way around. Make a description. Vedanta says all of them bundled together is a drop in the bucket. That's an English idiom. He said drop in the bucket means bucket is so large and the water drop is so small. So don't be carried away either by notions of who you are transactionally or by ideas of who the other person is. While valuing everything in its proper context, there is certain truth about you, not somewhere far away. The truth of your existence. You are actually much vaster than what you imagine yourself to be. This can give to boys and girls tremendous sense of, then I'm fine. If I am much more than what I am presently taking myself to be, just like if somebody has 5 crores of money and he is investing in a new enterprise, putting in 50 lakhs at a time, and another 50 lakhs may be required within 3 months. He says, no problem. Another 4 crores are in my bank balance. Vedanta gives to you and me, even to people like me, no matter in what field we are, a sense of we are indestructible. So then the boys and girls with that self-confidence can afford to be themselves. Otherwise, during younger days, we wonder whether I should be like her, whether this man is my role model, whether you watch a movie and see a cinema star, you feel like, I think I better enter cinema, how wonderful it is. You watch somebody playing cricket, you say, sports is the field where I got to be. And you hear about some senior, some 10 years older to you getting a science award. Yeah, no, cinema, sports, all distraction. I'm going to plunge into science. Don't worry about anything. Ask yourself, what is your calling? What you enjoy? Whatever you enjoy. Joseph Campbell called it bliss. Follow your bliss, he said. Follow your bliss. You might have done post-graduation in engineering or medicine, but even at the age of 26, suppose you find my real calling is Carnatic music, then see whether you can get into it. It's never too late. If Tyagaraja Kritis send you to cloud 9, go ahead, and Vedanta supports you in that. Because Vedanta says, be original, don't just imitate X or Y. Vedanta says, come to a state of mind where you work not for happiness, you work out of happiness. If you love Sangeeta, for example, and you are playing or you are singing, whether there is audience of 10 or 10,000, if you love singing that particular piece, you sing out of happiness, not for happiness that will come when they applaud, right? So in simple terms, younger generation can get an insight into a certain prospect or possibility of happiness in them without depending upon these mundane things, which have a place of their own. Nobody says be negligent, be irresponsible, and live some kind of haphazard life. No, no. And lastly, I will come to that probably elsewhere also. Vedanta is not only metaphysics. Vedanta is not only saying everything is Brahma, rest of it is just appearance. That highest teaching has a place. As everybody knows, Vedanta is the body of wisdom which says Uttishtata Jagrata Prapyavaran Nibodhata. Arise, awake. And Vivekananda changed the last part. Stop not till the goal is reached. In the original it is arise, awake, go to competent teachers and learn the highest truth, the liberating wisdom. So in the Vedanta, there is a higher level A that may not be everybody's cup of tea. Most of the youth may not be able to make head or tail of it. But there is a level B, arise, awake. Or in Kenopanishad, there is on one hand, there is a reference to the truth, which is the ear of the ear, eye of the eye, shrotrasya shrotram, manaso manoyat, and all that. But the same Upanishad talks about tasyai tapo dama karmeti pratishtha, satyamayatanam, and so on. Concentration, being focused in whatever you do, that is tapas. Adi Shankara says, Indriyanam manasascha aikagrem, ekagrata tapaha. Tapaha is not standing on one leg in some Himalayan setting. In day-to-day life, if you and I work with focus, we work with concentration, take something, do it very well, then move to the next one. That is tapas. Tasyai brahma vidyayai tapo damaha, self-control, satyam. These are the tools. So, lots of values that are eternally relevant, are actually presented by the Upanishads. And youth, younger generation, will be much benefited by appreciating, not just memorizing, but by appreciating, yes, now I know the importance of Satya. Now I know the importance of, like Chandogya Upanishad talks about Sankalpa. You make an intention. Chandogya Upanishad talks about the place of Bala. Are you strong or are you a weak person? Says Sanat Kumara to Narada. Sanat Kumara makes a reference to some, I counted it as 23. Paramarthananda once said, if you see carefully, there are some 30 factors in human life which are all valuable. Satya, Sankalpa, Dhyana, Bala, Anna, and Mati, Shraddha, place of faith in life. This is not metaphysics. If you have faith in what you are studying, then a lot of things get clear. So, after talking a number of things, some 25 to 30 factors which mean a lot to human life, then Sanat Kumara comes to Bhuma. That is the metaphysics. Yo vai Bhuma tat sukham, na alpe sukham asti. So, Upanishads or Vedanta has two levels. For those who have less preparedness, who are not so prepared, not so receptive, there is a level B. Youth and so-called modern people can benefit tremendously from this level B. And any of them at their own sweet time get ready then they will appreciate level A. That is the ultimate solution to human unrest.
Swamiji, that was really fascinating listening to you. As a youth, I, I could really make sense each and every example that you gave to us. Thank you so much for sharing that. And my next question is, many times Vedanta is viewed as something that is beyond our reach, something
Yes.
that is only meant for the people meditating in the forest.
Yes.
What are the reasons for this misconception and how can it be resolved?
Correct. The misconception is partly due to how elders have presented Vedanta. So the Vedanta teachers, the grandfather in the house or an uncle at the in the family, suppose have sent a wrong message to young people, they will definitely think. Unfortunately, what can we do? It's difficult to avoid. A good number of people who get into spirituality because of their purva vasanas are unable to really live the teachings. They attend programs, they bring books home, and they will even be trying to study, but they are unable to change their way of living. For example, from anger to balance, from laziness to hardworking nature. So then what happens? Many others, young people or older people, looking at these inappropriate examples, they are not true representatives of spirituality. They are the larger number are trying, but they have not succeeded. So, looking at those examples, these people have a distorted picture of Vedanta. They will think that if this is what Vedanta does, going by the example of my uncle or aunt, I don't want to go anywhere near Vedanta. They don't know that there are, for every 7 people who fail, there are 2 or 3 who have transformed themselves. Many have transformed, maybe some quickly and some slowly. It's never too late. Someone can set oneself right even after crossing 50 or 60. So, why this idea Vedanta is not our cup of tea, it's not for us, it's beyond our reach, comes is these wrong examples influence us negatively, and the right examples seem to be far away somewhere. So we are nowhere near them. Sometimes, the examples of some saints and sages are also given with some miracles and so on. Ramana Maharshi was sitting in Tiruvannamalai and snakes used to move around. Or once when he went to a nearby pond, a tiger or lion also had come to drink water. These are reported. They are true enough. So what will a common man say? Oh, I am nowhere near that kind of state. If I see a tiger coming on the other side of the lake, I would perhaps have no energy to run. I would just collapse there. That's not my cup of tea. It's beyond my reach and so on. So, unless we are fortunate, unless divine grace is upon us, we would not come across a representative case which makes sense to us. I, for one, was very fortunate. In the early days of my exposure to Vedanta, I saw Swami Paramarthananda. He was so simple and taught so beautifully, always with a smile on his face, and that was 1980. Now, after 40 years, I occasionally meet him when I go to Chennai. The same smile, the same contentment, the same good humor, and the same commitment to the study. So, for me, Vedanta meant a true transformative tool. It is the anchor with which one can be a very nice person. So, as I said in answering the earlier question also, this is the second and last part of this matter of wondering whether it is beyond our reach. Metaphysics may be beyond our reach, but a whole lot of supporting parts of the Vedanta are within everybody's reach. In every Upanishad, Isha, Kena, Kata, Mundaka, Aitreya, Taittiriya, Prashna, Mandukya, Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, and the other minor Upanishads too, there are some portions which are within reach of anybody. If presented properly, they would say this is exactly what we need. I read the modern management literature, Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, or in recent times, Robin Sharma, the monk who sold his Ferrari. Recently, he came out with a book, The 5 a.m. Club. As I read Robin Sharma, who is very gifted with a very wonderful language as well as lot of practical tips on how to integrate our life, I cannot but see that this is exactly what Upanishad said at such a place or such a place and so on. Take for example Gita. Gita is the best representative of Upanishads. In Sita Prajna Lakshana, does Sri Krishna talk about some Brahman and Atman and something beyond time and space only? Rather, he says, like a tortoise withdraws its limbs at the slightest danger. A wise person, if you are wise, you will hold your senses under control. Like the ocean maintains its balance or its level, even as rivers bring in water, you and I should learn how to remain calm and balanced as challenges come before us. If we have no self control, we are like a boat with sail that is driven away in wrong direction, maybe to its destruction by unfavorable winds. Vayur navam ivambasi. That shloka. In Sita Prajna Lakshana, there is so much said about how to live in viveka, mean right, distinguishing between right and wrong, and to not to do wrong and to engage in right. That is so important. So Sri Krishna, giving the essence of Upanishads, at many places in the Gita says, live a life of alertness, live a life of thoughtfulness, live a life of carefulness, and then you will rise to higher levels of spirituality. So that domain of right living is not beyond anybody's reach. Rather, everybody has to study that, master it. Then the metaphysics, they say where physics ends, metaphysics begins. Like Einstein took it to the level of questioning the absoluteness of space and time. Space and time are relative, he said. Vedanta says space and time are part of the appearance upon the substrate of Brahman. Brahman alone is real, and what appears upon Brahman, or to use the language of Swami Sachidanandendra Saraswati, what Brahman appears as, there is a distinction. Here is Brahman, and the universe appears upon it, would make you imagine that, oh, then there is something which comes and appears. Like here is the white screen, and using a projector, you project the movie. So the projector, the light, the film, etc. are over there. So Swami Sachidanandendra Saraswati says, it's not that something comes and goes upon Brahman, rather, Brahman alone is, Brahman appears as the universe. That's a technicality. So why I said that is, Einstein took us to questioning the absoluteness of space and time. Whereas metaphysics of the Vedanta asks us to recognize that there is a certain truth where there is no space, no time. Maya kalpita desha kala kalana vaichitra chitrikritam tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye. So desha and kala, space and time, have been included in the appearance and not in the essential nature of the truth that is Brahman. So it's not beyond reach, it's a misconception. So if one gets properly introduced, one will look at Vedanta as such a rich mine of so much gems of so much precious stones of valuable guidance to daily life for anybody.
Thank you, Swamiji. That was really eye-opening.
Thank
And Swamiji, you also head the 4Y Forum, a non-profit that disseminates philosophical and spiritual knowledge. Could you please tell us a bit about the work that is carried out through the forum?
First of all, forum is a well-known English word, a platform. FOI is an abbreviation, an acronym which has this expansion, flame of who am I? So who am I is the question that Ramana Maharshi upheld, and flame of is part of a title of one of J. Krishnamurti's books, Flame of Attention. For in one of his very insightful statements, he says, if you are attentive, your attention is like a flame that burns away without leaving a residue all your regrets, shame, guilt, fear, and anything which is because of memories, right? So flame of attention, here flame of who am I? To put it briefly, it's a spiritual organization to share wisdom for right action. Wisdom for right action is our slogan, and we visualize broadly work to be done in two domains. We are about to, in fact, build an ashram also between Mumbai and Pune, near the well-known town of Khopoli. And that ashram also will have activities in these two domains, Shakti and Shanti. Shakti is in the domain of Dharma in turn. Shakti, Dharma, Yoga, these are all one category. Shanti is in the domain of Moksha. It is pure Jnana, and it is the core of Upanishadic teachings. So we wish to have programs in various ways. Modern technology now is making it possible for us to disseminate wisdom in newer ways, all these internet platforms and so on. So under Shakti, the emphasis is on human values, soft skills, all rooted in Dharma, Dharma-centered life skills. And under Shanti, Shakti and Shanti, these are the two wings of our programs. Some programs may be primarily Shanti oriented, with a little of Shakti oriented material. But some programs are primarily Shakti oriented. Take, for example, we will invite 100 school teachers and have a program on values required for education for both teachers and students. We may welcome a bunch of 50 management executives, and in leadership, in communication, in areas of relationships, in emotional intelligence, in handling stress, etc. What do our scriptures, not only Gita and Upanishads, but Vidura Niti, Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, and many other. So 90% of our work will be from Indian ethos. That is where we are trained. But 10% we welcome inputs from other wisdom traditions of the world too. If there is a Zen master visiting Mumbai, we may invite him, hold a 3-day program at our place, and interested people will join it. So FOI Forum has certain publications also, and we are going to bring out more, of course. So let me see whether I can show at this time itself. Yeah. Is it showing this slide?
Not at the moment. Yes, I can see that. I can see the books.
Oh, right. That's what I wanted. Oh.
I think you can go back to the previous slide.
Okay.
Yes.
It went ahead. So how do I? Screen sharing has stopped. I wanted to go behind, it went ahead actually. Now maybe, oh, now I think I have a new way of, okay, here I begin. Is it showing?
Yes, Swamiji, yes. I can
Okay,
see
so just to
books.
give an idea, these are all publications of Forum. So you have the Equanimous Mind, which is a bunch of 31 articles, very introductory stuff in spirituality. The utter beginner can take up this book. It just runs into some 8 days. Then secondly, daily bites. That is, the idea is for 31 days of the month, you have one article for each morning. This is all Upanishad based, but expressed in a simple language, in an anecdotal style. And then third one, you have Light on Right Living. This has some 64 one-page articles on various topics that are of relevance to living a more mature life. Light on Right Living, including, as I said a while ago, about communication, about leadership, about time management, about emotional intelligence. All these come in this third Light on Right Living. I was inspired to write a book, Erase the Ego, drawing from Ramana Maharshi's teachings. So this book, Erase the Ego, is totally on teachings of Ramana Maharshi expressed in a liberal style. In fact, many of those chapters begin with some story that Maharshi Ramana used to share. So one of his illustrative story and then comments by the author. Then freedom in action. This is an expression of Swami Chinmayananda. He used to say, freedom is not from action, that you run away from action. Freedom is to be discovered in action, even as you are active, even as you are handling challenges. So this is a bunch of articles for day-to-day life. And lastly, Mukundamala. This is the famous work in praise of Lord Sri Krishna, written by a king and saint, Kulashekara Alvar. I have explained all the nearly 42 shlokas in English. And incidentally, um, this has been translated into Kannada also, called Nemmadiya Manassu. And yeah, that will, at this point itself, let me just say. So Fawai Forum has several teachers, several Swamis also coming in and contributing. But on a regular basis, Brahmacharani Vibha Chaitanya is in Pune. She offers Vedanta classes regularly. And I operate from several places. On Fawai channel of YouTube, I have Gita and Upanishad classes on a regular basis. So, yes, I would like to show the Kannada translation is here, Nemmadiya Manassu. A lady in Goa, Ashwini Kulkarni, translated the book Equanimous Mind into Nemmadiya Manassu. So our job, you asked about Fawai Forum. Our job is to gather ideas that give us Shakti, that position us well in Dharma, and ideas and insights that take us further up towards Shanti, towards that moksha. You know, the four Purusharthas, Kama, Artha, Dharma, and Moksha. Spiritual organizations work in the third and fourth Purusharthas, Dharma and Moksha. So Fawai Forum also is working in the field of Dharma and Moksha, guidance to society. In the process, we ourselves enrich ourselves continually.
Thank you, Swamiji, for sharing this. And Swamiji, where can the audience buy these books? Where can they find
Yes,
them?
we have a website, fowai.org, FOWAI.org. So visitors can visit that, and there the necessary address, email, etc. is provided. So nowadays, thanks to technology, and books are actually shown there. These are the books available. We don't have online sale, which
Okay.
we may introduce eventually, but one can write a simple email. I want 5 copies of, let's say, the Equanimous Mind.
Mhm.
And our office in Bombay will respond very quickly.
Thank you, Swamiji. And we're almost towards the conclusion of our conversations. And I would request you to make any concluding remarks to our viewers.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes. At many places, we are asked, what would you advise, especially the younger generation? I see it this way. Human life is very precious. And before even we realize what is happening, we get older. And life itself comes to an end. Now, in COVID pandemic time, you see how many people, even of younger age, left the earth and went. So, life, as Bhajagovindam says, Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam tadvad jivitam atishaya chapalam. Like a water drop on the lotus leaf in a lake. Life is so unpredictable. Any moment that drop may fall into the lake, vanish. Any moment life may come to an end. In such a scenario, what I would appeal to people is take the benefit of the rich wisdom of the Vedanta, rich wisdom of these spiritual teachers, luminaries, spiritual giants. We have Ramana, we have Nisargadatta, we have Ramana, J. Krishnamurti. We have so many beacons of light. They have gone into all conflicts of human life. And I especially would say this, neither um, waste time in reinventing the wheel. If somebody says, look, I don't want to read anybody, I'll find out for myself. That would be like saying I'll reinvent the wheel. We don't do that in outer life. We don't say, I don't want any car, I'm going to build my own car at my house. We can't do that. So don't reinvent the wheel. Do receive. There are sources, but at the same time, I do respect their aspiration to find out for themselves. Therefore, I would say, don't take anybody for face value. Don't blindly follow anybody. Because Chinmayananda appealed to this Chidananda, you don't have to just like that accept Chinmayananda. Study him, and like it did to me, if it appeals to you, if the literature of Vivekananda or Chinmayananda appeals to you, then go ahead. So what I am saying in summary is, people should draw with an open mind. They should draw from available guidance, be open. What such and such mystic, such and such great thinker, such and such great seer has said. Be open, but then without following anybody blindly, inquire and take what truly appeals to you and try to live it. This is how I would sum up what we have to do in the context of spiritual education.
Thank you so much, Swamiji. And with this, we conclude this session. And from the entire team of Advaita Academy, I thank you immensely for accepting our invitation and joining us today and sharing these thoughts with us. Thank you so much. And viewers,
I
with
enjoyed
this,
interacting with you, Manu, and may all these interviews with other scholars be truly fruitful. May they help the society in general. Keep up your good work.
thank you, Swamiji. Viewers, with this, we conclude yet another session of Conversations on Consciousness. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.